Welcome to Wiser Dialogue, conversations with women of color about issues, policies, and research that impact our lives. Our guests for this episode are Monica Garcia Perez, an associate professor of economics at St. Cloud State University in Minnesota, Katrina Hester, a middle school teacher in Hanover County, Virginia, and Matilda Young, a pediatric pharmacist in Los Angeles, California. Welcome, ladies. So, Monica, I want to start with you. Your research deals with immigrant children and the impacts of public policies. So would you tell us a little bit about your work?
Yes, thank you, Rhonda, for the invitation and giving me this opportunity to share my work. My research look at the effect of parental nativity on children's healthcare usage, utilization, and overall healthcare outcomes, and healthcare in general, healthcare coverage. This is about all groups of immigrants, like parental nativity as an overall immigration background, no immigration status, place of birth, and what I want to see is that if there is some connection between children patterns in terms of health outcomes and health utilization and parental background, regions, place of birth, where people are from. And I look at immigrant children and U.S. born. It's in general children of immigrants. Well, I have looked at the entire 0 to 17 and then to the preteen ages. For the 0 to 17, I was concentrated on that group because some of the assumptions among this group is that they are way younger than within the age of 0 to 17 that the general native population, because immigrant families tend to have more kids and younger kids, and they are younger too. So then I look at the preteen on more deep questions about the patterns of visit to the doctors and typical BMI measures. So yeah, I look at the entire, what we define as a kid, 0 to 17 years old, children of immigrants.
So are you looking at Latin American, Eastern European, Africa? Like, can you tell us a little bit if you disaggregate the group, how you disaggregate them?
Yes, part of the curiosity in terms of immigration, there is immigrant groups are very diverse, and there are some differences relationship within the family and within how mothers take care of the children too. But in terms of the group, I was interested in seeing if there was differentiation between the children of Latin American mothers or the children of African mothers or Asian mothers. What I find is that there is a difference. Overall, all children of immigrants are less likely to visit the doctor at least one time. And this is major because for children, the annual checkup is recommended at least once a year. It's the basic recommendation from pediatrician. So if we see this different across all groups, but we see that is perpetuated or is worse among children of African mothers and children of Latin American mothers compared to children of Asian mothers. Yeah.
Wow, that wouldn't have thought that, right? So you said African and Latin American moms, but not Asian mothers. Do you have a sense of what might be driving that?
I think part of that is other access to other resources, because the connection that I do of how parental nativity may affect children's outcomes in health and health coverage is through how many barriers their families, in this particular case, moms, the mothers, have to access to resources, information, and the know-how overall. And then this can be correlated to income, it could be correlated to networks, and it could be correlated to, immigrant networks too. So there is this connection between the barriers that parents, and in this particular case, mothers, have to knowing how to use the service, or knowing what are the rights or the services that are provided for kids, and what we see as an outcome or as a final part is that the kids are not using the resources as the basic usage that we should see.
You've mentioned that resources in the community can be a huge hurdle in terms of mothers utilizing healthcare for their children. But are there any other things that are showing up in your research that might hinder a mother's ability to advocate for her child?
Well, the system itself, because mothers do not have access to especially immigrant women who are recently arrived or undocumented, are just not banned, but they don't have access equally across all the states. So some few states have prenatal care and some coverage for those recent immigrants, even documented immigrants, and the undocumented immigrants are included in benefits that are coming from federal resources. So there is that structural, that it's outside just the network and information, is the actual access to resources that would allow them to not only know how the service is and how to use it, but also use them for themselves. Yeah. Yes, and in terms of being recent immigrant, because since the welfare reform, recent immigrants that have less than 5 years are not covered by federal, but cannot use federal public benefits, and that includes public health coverage or anything related to health at the federal level. So only a number of 15, 17 states, women, regardless of the time in the U.S., can have access to certain resources. And this is for documented immigrants. So not just the immigration status, but also how long they have resided in the U.S.
3 to 5 points that you hear about immigration, undocumented, documented immigrants, immigrant moms, immigrant children, that you wish people would stop perpetuating?
The myth is thinking that this is a problem just among low-income immigrant women. So this is not a problem just about low income. This is about a problem of a newcomer overall, one. But the second one, it's that there is also this myth of overuse of the system. So people have the idea that, well, if you allow them to have access, they're gonna overuse. And actually, among the community, there is a tendency even for underuse, even for those who have access to it. So it's more about the basic of having preventive care. What I really think we should advocate for the actual use, the good use of services in terms of preventive care. And I think the third, and this is overall because I started with putting all immigrant mothers in a pocket, is that the diversity within the immigrant group. And that's going to be a key of thinking that we are just one pocket. Yeah, there's certain things that is affecting immigrant mothers the same way and how they can advocate for their children, but there's certain characteristic of each group that the process that we can help them to advocate for the kids are going to differ, is going to be different depending on the background. So I think those three things would be the ones that I will highlight.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So Matilda, let's start with some tips for parents who might have questions about medicines that have been prescribed for their child. Can you offer parents some advice about how they might get information about side effects, dosage, and would you also tell us some of the common concerns that when you interact with parents that you hear being asked?
Well, the best way is always to ask questions. Whenever a new prescription is picked up at a pharmacy, you will be asked if you want a consultation, and I would say to answer yes. The pharmacist is trained to give you information about how to take it, when to take it, and what to do if you miss a dose, and to look out for common side effects. If you still have questions later on, you can always call your pharmacist. If you develop that relationship, and they're happy to answer their questions. I think the one thing that a parent should do before they leave the pharmacy is repeat everything they've heard. So that way, Oh, so that way they can make sure that they've caught everything that the pharmacist mentioned.
So now I'm going to ask you to go from your professional hat as a pharmacist to your role as a mom. You've gotten some information about your daughter and her social interaction. Would you tell us a little bit about
that? Yes. So my daughter was recently diagnosed with a condition called selective mutism. And what that is a social anxiety communication disorder. So she feels comfortable in certain social situations, but very uncomfortable in other situations. Sure, when she's comfortable, she will communicate as any child would communicate normal. Carry a full conversation, laugh, joke, use her words to express her feelings. In a situation, but in other social situations, and in her case, it's the classroom or the schoolyard, she does not use, she is nonverbal, and she has anxiety regarding using words, her words.
How did you learn that she was a selective mute?
2 years ago, we went to the pediatrician for a well check visit, and the pediatrician was in the office with my daughter for just 2 minutes. And in that time, my pediatrician noticed that she was not behaving appropriate for her age in terms of communication, and spoke with me, asked me about it. And my son was also with me, and the pediatrician asked my son, well, what do you see Shelby doing at the play yard? And my son, Devin, said that she watches. She doesn't participate in play. She watches. And he actually said that there was one time that she approached him to want to play with him and his friends. The reason is that Shelby is very, people might say shy, people might say quiet, but it's more than that. It's an anxiety disorder where she is afraid and gets panicked. It feels panicky when speaking with her peers. The misconception is that maybe a couple of misconceptions that maybe the child was traumatized in the past, or that maybe she's choosing not to speak, but it's neither of those. In fact, most children that have been diagnosed with selective mutism have not experienced trauma. And we know that it is not a choice because this has been ongoing for several years. I was not aware that it was to this degree of her not speaking at all in school until last year.
How do you advocate for her in terms of treatment or coping, and you can tell us what's the appropriate language for when your child is a selective mute? How are you advocating? What are the steps that you're taking?
So I understood very little about the condition when the pediatrician first mentioned it, and it prompted me to read about it, get books, and search out help from the school therapist and from a local therapist. Many times, therapists will say that they have experience with children with selective mutism, but it doesn't mean they have the proper training and ability to work through it with the child. And so that was my experience. That was our experience. And without going into details, we went through several meetings with the school therapist and with a local therapist without any progress. And that was for about a year. So it became a point where, she's in 4th grade and middle school is around the corner. It'll be a new school, very different way of things, very different classroom setting. And so I knew that there was an urgency to take care of, to find help. And I found a center called Smart Center in Philadelphia, and they run a Communicamp. It's called Communicamp. They run a few camps a year. And so we attended the camp last February, and we gained lots of good tools, and Shelby gained lots of good tools. I also attended a therapy for parents at the same camp, and it really has helped. We've learned so much more in attending that short period of time than we did in weeks of therapy.
So Matilda, earlier you mentioned a couple of myths around selective mutism. So if I could get you, if you have three, if you have, no more than five, but if you have, at least three, that you can tell me what's the myth and why it's a myth.
First myth, that selective mutism is a choice. It's not a choice at all. Children feel anxious and in certain social situations, while in other situations they feel very free to speak. Myth number two, that there's an easy fix. There is not an easy fix. There's a lot of little steps and everyday implementation that the parent and the child has to work on. And then myth number three, that children with selective mutism, they want to participate, they want to communicate, and oftentimes they communicate in other ways. Hand gestures, smiles, or sometimes whispering to a whisper buddy is still a communication.
So Katrina, this month we've been talking to parents who in particular their daughters have what we might consider some developmental social anxieties or challenges. I understand you have two daughters.
Yes.
And their ages are?
8 and 6.
8 and 6. And which of your daughters had some developmental challenges, or what's the correct term?
Well, it was developmental delay previously, and then a speech language delay. But now she has the autistic label from the school system, where previously it was just from a developmental pediatrician. I understand it to be a very big spectrum, going from mild to really extreme. So they say that my daughter's mild on the spectrum, so I can't really speak to students or children who don't speak at all. But for her, it's just that it's affecting her socially, and then they said her writing, so she also gets OT as well as getting the speech.
And
they're
OT
trying to
is
work
occupational
therapy to try to work on her handwriting, and she wants things to be right. I guess they say with children with autism, it's like black or white. So she knows how to read, and she's willing to do that. But when you give her something to write, then she gets frustrated because she can't even think of it. Yesterday it was writing the number 6. Well, Mommy, you do it, because she wants it to be right the initial time. So that's something that I find, like, if she knows right away she can't do it, she's going to get upset and throw a tantrum that probably a 2-year-old should be throwing.
Okay, got you. You see the behavior being different, and potentially why might it be more of a challenge, and that may not be the right word, if you're a little girl?
I guess maybe you could be used to girls being more quiet in general. So when she has these outbursts, it almost seems like she's a behavior issue. But it could be, like, I went to an arts and science festival and there were too many people in the hallway, and she's grabbing me and saying, "No show, Mommy, please, no show." Or there's a long line at Bass Pro to go get your picture with the bunny or Santa, and she says, "Line too long, we go home." But she'll cry or she'll be loud, and then everyone turns around and look at you. And I guess you're just used to girls just being, for the most part at that age, just prim and proper and quiet.
Okay. And so part of the challenge is that's behavior that we, dare I say, normalize for boys, but not for girls.
Right. Boys are more active than a girl would be, and she's very active. Like, if she could probably stand up all day and get her work done, it'd probably work better for her. But of course, in real life, like, you're going to have to sit sometime.
Okay. And does she participate in these sports?
No, she doesn't participate in any sports, but she goes to gym with her classmates, and then she wants to play. And most of the boys want to play with her at aftercare because I guess she's so energetic, but then she can be rough too, and they'll be like, "Oh, you hurt me," that they'll say to her. So I think they might be a little scared of her too. So that's, I think, me wanting her to make friends, and I don't know if she's really making them because the boys enjoy playing with her, and then they're a little scared, and I guess the girls just don't know how to handle her.
So I'm going to ask you, if there were 5, we're going to call them myths, and myths may not be correct, but if you just think about the ways in which people have interacted with you and your family that you wish people understood about autism, or even developmental delay, that they don't. And so there are assumptions that they make. So if there are like 5 things that you, and it doesn't have to be 5, but at most 5, that your experience that you're just like, it's not this, it's not this, it's not this, you know.
I guess that's the hard part with autism, because what it looks like in one child, it isn't in the other, because I often get told she's atypical because she does sleep through the night, and most children with autism don't sleep. She's atypical because she doesn't have to eat the same things every day. She will try anything once, but she also loves food. Some say that means that your children always walk on their tippy toes, but she does not walk on her tippy toes, or it's a spinning. You just spin around all the time. She will spin from time to time, or you see her flapping. But I think the real myth is that you might think it's autism, but it could be something else. Like, it's not a cookie cutter because it's such a broad spectrum. So that would be the main thing.
I'd like to thank my guests, Monica Garcia Perez, Katrina Hester, and Matilda Young. You have been watching Wiser Dialogue, The Missing Viewpoint.